Today I would like to explore with you one aspect of the receptivity to the Achaemenid Persian Empire in 5th century Athens, the surprising phenomenon that Persian fashion became all the rage for those who could afford it. We can wax lyric about the heights of Greek cultural achievements, their philosophy, their drama, their poetry, their Parthenon. But we have to be honest about one thing. Greek dress was primitive. It was comprised of rectangular lengths of cloth as removed from the loom and wrapped or pinned about the body without further ado. Few examples of ancient dress survive, but other kinds of evidence, notably vase painting and sculpture, allow us to trace its evolution. Women's dress included the chiton and the peplos. The woolen peplos was folded and pinned at the shoulders. The linen chiton comprised a length folded in half and buttoned together at the top, leaving space for the neck. When worn with a belt, the extension of the garment over the arms can look like sleeves, but they are not. This lady wears a black himation over her red chiton. Here you can see under her basket the red false sleeve on her right arm. In the traditional Greek wardrobe, quality of dress was conveyed solely through the fineness of the wool from which it was woven and the amplitude with which it was draped. Men's clothing was similar. Older men especially might wear the chiton, like this father farewelling his son about to go to war. Shorter version, the chitonoskos, was used for active movement. Here, the son wears it under his corselet. Over top, a thick cloak, the himation, might be worn equally by men as women. Here the poets Alcaeus and Sappho wear the chiton. She has a himation as well. He has a short cloak. Men's dress did not include the peplos, which was strictly for women. Within this rectilinear wardrobe, elaboration was possible. The fabric might be dyed, and sometimes a contrasting border was made. These archaic marble chori, dedicated on the Athenian Acropolis and buried after the Persian sack, were recovered with their paint intact, giving evidence for dyeing and ornamental borders. For the classical period, Attic white ground and red-figured vase painting provide clear indications of the several ways in which this rectilinear wardrobe could be worn. But suddenly, garments with actual tailored sleeves start to appear, making a radical departure from traditional Greek dress. This marble funerary stele for Mytion shows a figure gazing at the bird she holds. Over top her chiton, she wears a sleeved open jacket. At her wrists, the sleeve's edge is clearly visible. In the last quarter of the 5th century, a number of round jugs, koes like this, show images of children at play. Occasionally, as on this koos, they wear a sleeved jacket. Sometimes we see images of garments with real sleeves that are not jackets, like this lady being fanned on a white ground lekathos. The inclusion of tailored sleeves is a radical departure from traditional Greek dress. In art, sleeves stand out in contrast to the norm. Such garments quote a sartorial grammar of the Persian rider dress, recently introduced across the Near East by the conquests of Cyrus the Great. This frieze from Persepolis shows a procession of Persian nobles. They wear two different clothing systems. The court dress is a long robe, somewhat like the chiton in overall design. The rider dress is active wear, involving a sleeved garment and trousers, wholly unlike the Greek repertoire. The women's sanctuary of the goddess Artemis at Brauron in East Attica provides valuable information about women's clothing. Many offerings survive from here, especially weaving equipment, similar to what you see: thigh protectors for wool working, spindle whorls for spinning, and loom weights for weaving. such items of fired clay survive, but not much else does. Fortunately, the offerings dedicated by women to Browronian Artemis were recorded in lists and at some point carved on stone stelae like these. The lists document the many kinds of votive offering that cannot survive the passage of time. Especially precious are descriptions of clothing. One such listing reads, Candace, Diophante, wife of Hieronymus of Acharnae, with gold attachments, worn. We know nothing about Diophante beyond this simple entry. The inclusion of her husband's demotic, Acharnae, tells us that she was herself the daughter of an Athenian citizen. We do not know the occasion of the dedication, unfortunately. But typically, prized personal items were offered to Artemis at times of transition, such as after successful childbirth. The fact that Diophante's dedication is described as worn fits the characterization of prized personal possession. What makes this dedication especially worthy of note is the fact that it was a Candace. The Candace is a quintessentially Persian item of clothing. It is easily recognizable in Persian art as the garment worn cloak-like with empty sleeves hanging down as part of the Persian rider dress. In other words, the Browronian clothing inventories are telling us that by the late 5th century, some respectable Athenian women owned and wore a Persian garment. Why? And how did it look? A search for representations of women wearing the Candace with sleeves hanging empty in Attic art yields only mythological figures like Andromeda, whose Candace sleeves are clearly distinguished. But in the later 5th century, sleeved jackets suddenly appear in Attic art on women and children. This makes me suspect that the Athenian women, unconstrained by Persian male practice, started to make and wear sleeved garments in what they thought was a la mode Paris, putting their arms through the sleeves, which is very un-Persian. Diophantus's Candace is further described as having gold attachments. What might these be? The word used is pasmatia. To consider the gold attachments, we need to go back to the past, the expansion of the Persian Empire under Cyrus, Cambyses, and Darius. The capture of Sardis in 546 especially important. This led to the invasion of Greece in 490, 480, and 479. A handful of Persian artifacts excavated in Greece may be invasion survivals. Several were found in sanctuaries, so there's a good chance they were dedicated as Persian war booty. The Persian horse bit on the left came from the Athenian Acropolis, and the helmet below, inscribed "taken from the Medes," was offered to Zeus at Olympia. Smaller artifacts, too, like these stamp seals, survive. These happen to have been found again at sanctuaries in Athens and Olympia. But of special interest today are two small gold clothing attachments of pacing lions. They were excavated at sanctuaries at Levona, sanctuary of Zeus at Levona, and sanctuary of the great gods at Samothrace, as marked on this map. But other gold attachments, like this lion head with radiate mane, must have been recovered by the Greeks. I insist on this because the image type suddenly appears as a shield device in an Attic red-figured painting about the time of the Persian Wars. Even more amazing is a scrap of ancient linen textiles preserved in a bronze vessel used as a cinerary urn in the late 6th and 5th century. Pinholes preserve an embroidered design of a lozenge pattern. Within each diamond is the shape of a small pacing lion, like the one excavated at Persepolis. This find is even more spectacular because all indications are that embroidery was itself a foreign decorative technique. Now, amidst all the hundreds of items of clothing dedicated to Browronian Artemis and recorded on the lists, we find record of 5 other women, only 5 others, who offered a Candace. 2 were deemed worthy of placement on the cult statue. The earliest Candace is listed as poikilos, or multicolored. Another Candace is described as amorgine, which may signify silk. These were luxury garments, to judge both from their rarity and their rich decoration. They must have made quite a splash. You may be wondering what Persian women wore. We have unfortunately very little evidence for them. This ivory statuette comes from Susa in Iran. Other figures come from all over the empire, from Iraq, from Jordan, from Afghanistan, from Egypt, and from Turkey. Despite their wide dispersal, they all seem to show women wearing the same kind of dress, which suggests that it is Persian dress, and specifically the standard garment of Persian women. What's interesting, it is akin to that of the men's court robe and not the rider dress. Here's a comparison between the women's robe and the men's robe. The distinctive folds at the front are based on the way it's draped with the belt. This suggestion is analogous to that in Greece, where you will recall that men as well as women wore the chiton, often under a himation. The Brownian inventory lists included another ungrammatical garment, listed as the herodotos chiton. This literally means sleeved chiton. The garment was so foreign that it does not have an actual name. The term sleeved chiton is descriptive. It articulates the fact that this kind of chiton has tailored sleeves. A sleeved garment, you will recall, is an element of Persian rider dress. Now, a hard look at that vase painting recovers a few depictions of Athenians who wear a sleeved garment. You have already seen this funerary vessel with a woman seated, surrounded by her attendants. The vertical stripes along her arms show clearly that she wears a sleeved garment. Her fan bearer shows that she is one of the elite of Athens. But my favorite example is the elegantly dressed young woman leading a procession to Apollo. To act as kanephoros, that is, to carry the ritual basket at the head of a sacrificial procession, was an especially prestigious office for a nubile girl. She has responded to the honor by decking herself out in a richly patterned sleeved garment worn over her chiton. The garment design is foreign in origin, certainly, but the patterning worked into it is pure Greek. It must have been produced in Athens in emulation of the tailored garments to the East to be worn in the context of conspicuous display. In fact, Balbina Bebler has established from epigraphical evidence that the so-called persicae, which we know from Aristophanes' comedy, their persicae are Persian slippers, were actually made in Athens. A few men in Athens, notably pipes players, also adopt a sleeved garment, to judge from the imagery. Some instances, like the man at the right, date shortly after the Persian War period. There is a third garment that I suspect is yet another Oriental import, although its precise genealogy is not clear. It is a short tunic-like garment worn by both women and men over a chiton. It was known to the Greeks as the appendites. The appendites is the earliest recognizable foreign garment to appear in Athens, arriving in the first generation or so after the Persian Wars, after a brief existence in the Archaic period as the dress of musicians. This will have been after the capture of Sardis. Often highly decorated, it contrasts with the sobriety of the traditional wardrobe. On the left is an aulite wearing an appendites with a fringe. In the funerary scene on the right, a woman wears an appendites, a white appendites, with a wide zigzag band at the center. Later in the 5th century, we see highly elaborated examples, often worn in a special context. On this course in New York, women appear to be engaged in the ritual activity of perfuming garments. perhaps for the Anthesteria festival. In the detail at right, you can easily distinguish the patterned appendices over the chiton with its false sleeves. The garment is foreign in type, and the patterning is extensive, poikilos. But note that the border is a Greek meander, which should signify that it was made in Greece. Judging from the literary, epigraphical, and artistic evidence, it is clear that over the course of the 5th century BC, especially towards its end, a taste for Persian or Persian-like items of dress developed in Athens, especially for women and children. The traditional linear wardrobe was enlivened by these foreign touches. The new garments quote the sartorial grammar of Persian rider dress. Why were they so attractive? Very likely, they evoked something of the opulence and elegance of the powerful and wealthy neighbor to the east.